PDP at Tribunal national poll. Details now. The World News at 6 begins with the People's Democratic Party presidential candidate Atiku Abubakar accusing the Presidential Election Petition Court of undermining his quest for justice for delaying the release of the certified true copies of its judgment. VOP News gathered that Frank Shaibu, the Special Assistant and Public Communications to the former Vice President, said in a statement earlier on today that the Presidential Election Petition Court had not released the CTCs of the judgment 3 days after it was delivered. Shaibu said the delay was frustrating Atiku's lawyers, who have just 14 days to file an appeal to the Supreme Court. He said the Presidential Election Petition Court had made heavy weather at the delivery of its judgment on Wednesday that parties need to adhere strictly to the time schedule set by the court. He said the Presidential Petition Tribunal had struck out the testimonies of some of Atiku's witnesses during the litigation at the Court of First Instance because their statements on oath were found out of time. He stated further, and I quote, "And now, from all intent and purposes, the same court wants to have Atiku and PDP's appeal to the Supreme Court disqualified by the reason of time deadline. Does the Presidential Election Petition Court not understand that the lawyers representing Atiku, PDP, need to digest the judgment as contained in the CTC, which represents the authentic pronouncement made in court on Wednesday in order to formulate its case for filing?" Shaibu queried. Okay, so I have via the telephone a public affairs analyst. He's quite a political enthusiast as well, and that's Great Imo. Great Imo, good evening and welcome to VOP World News at 6.
Good evening, Esther, and good evening to your audience.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Great. It is not surprising that we are hearing the opposition political parties, who tendered their petition at the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal, complaining that the CTCs required for them to digest and study has not been given to them, and they have a 14-day window to tender their appeal. You'll recall that the Labour Party complained of the same thing as well immediately after the election took place, as well as the PDP, where they were requiring INEC to provide them the beavers and the necessary machines through which they could get out evidence to filing their appeal within the stipulated window. Would we say this is a deliberate tactic by our judicial system, especially the echelon, to delay justice?
Well, this is a symptom of a deeper issue with Nigeria. It has to do with irresponsible behavior by elements who are given responsibility to manage our institutions. The judiciary in itself is as an entity. There are various characters within these institutions who have formed the habit of actually undermining their institutions and the Nigerian state. And it's not only the judiciary. We have seen it also in the case of INEC that you made reference to. An umpire who was supposed to be an unbiased umpire, non-partisan, and when it was supposed to provide, copies of this polling unit result at the election tribunal, they refused to do so. But the problem here is that because the systems are broken down, there are usually no consequences for their actions. We have seen where people issued duality of oaths. Various institutions of Nigerian state are being undermined by certain elements, and this has gone on for years, and nobody is saying anything. But we are dangerously sliding to such a position where members of the society will stop believing in these institutions and to get to a point where people start taking laws into their hands. And this is not good. Yeah. I am in absolute support of what you said, because the struggle for democracy and the rule of law is not a sprint. It is a marathon, and it's a continuum. In America, the black community in America struggled for over 80 years for the right to vote. Likewise, the struggle against apartheid was for over 80 years. The struggle against military leadership, rulership in Nigeria was for so many years. Now we're in a democracy, and this democracy, if we allow these infractions to continue, it will drive us into inertia. And before you know it, the elements who hijack the society might become worse than those who have struggled against what install this democracy. It is a struggle where the rule of law was not upheld by the tribunal. For example, I've noticed some loopholes. Imagine a tribunal saying that somebody had no intention to commit a crime when on the face of the law the crime has been committed. I don't know what else we want to say. The law says within a period of 14 days, if you want to do substitution, you have a window, and this substitution was not done. Double nomination. What I found is very interesting is the use of the word that the crime was actually committed, but you are telling the person that he has no intention. It's like an armed robber coming to the court to say, I have no intention. Who knows anybody's intention? The rule of law must be followed absolutely. We have seen a case of forfeiture which has been adjudicated upon by the Supreme Court of Nigeria, from the High Court to Appeal Court to Supreme Court.
Continue, sir. Go ahead.
Yes, and now the current CJN, who was one of those who sat on that the Supreme Court judgment, declared effectively that every form of forfeiture is a criminal offense, and you're coming to a tribunal who says things like that should be ignored. Then the tribunal does not have a right to conjure a law for Nigeria. You talk about the officials of INEC having discretionary powers to change the rule of game in the middle of the game. What was the intention of the society by advocating for the Electoral Act reform, which was passed into law, that also which was from where the electoral guidelines were derived, which was the reason why we voted close to 400 billion for the use of IREF, which was why INEC made consistent pronouncements saying there's electronic transmission and all of that. You come to court and the tribunal judge tells you that it didn't matter what the law was, and everybody thinks it's normal. We are not normal. The rule of law must be followed, and the struggle to ensure the rule of law is the most crucial struggle in the history and in the life of our nation right now. Any attempt to guard Nigerians from expressing and from pursuing and from achieving the pursuit of rule of law is an attempt to destroy this nation, and we must not allow that to happen.
Let's also look at some things that were tabled down as part of explaining why most of the petitions tendered by the opposition parties, the Labour Party and the PDP, were dismissed. The tribunal judges mentioned a lot of porosities that were observed on how the petition was tendered. In fact, they complained about a lot of things, from the upload of the transmission of results, which they said INEC is at its disposal to upload, and whatever means they decide to use in collating or transmitting results is at the discretion of INEC. Then the drug dealing allegations against President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. Now, this is what a lot of Nigerians needed to understand. We will continue to talk about those reactions because a lot of Nigerians are still trying to get themselves, acquainted with what the tribunal disclosed at the court 2 days ago. Now, the court held that Tinubu had earlier been cleared by the Nigerian police force of any criminal issues in the US, which came through an inquiry the police had made to the US law enforcement agents. It further disclosed the president has been able to enter and exit the US, and thus suggests he has no criminal case. So, Samani said the judgment of the U.S. District in Northern Illinois, which ordered the forfeiture of Tinubu's $460,000 in a drug-related case, was in civil proceedings in which Tinubu was not a party. Now, the question is, in the Constitution, agreed, you don't necessarily have to be convicted, but the fact that you have such a case attached to your person is an underlying factor to not, objectively qualify somebody to be a candidate for a political party or to vie for that office. But would you agree with the judgment that was given as to this? And then why did the Labour Party's legal team not see that this could be a technicality that the judges at the Electoral Petition Tribunal could use to dismiss their petition?
It's just funny. It's just funny. Every crime and every miscarriage of justice, somebody must adduce reasons for doing them. But the question is that are they anchored on the law of the Federal Republic of Nigeria? Number one, the Election Petition Tribunal telling us that there is at the discretion of INEC to choose. That is absolute lie, because that is the reason for having the electoral law. The electoral law says that the INEC, based on that law, is empowered to establish a guideline, and that guideline is a derivative of the electoral law. And once that guideline is approved by the INEC, every party participant in the electoral process must be availed of these guidelines. And that guideline means that this is the procedure that guides INEC and every participant in that election cycle. Hence, it is not the discretion, it is based on the electoral law that guideline is established. And once the guideline is established, the law foresees that you are supposed to follow it to the letter. And in the electoral guideline, even in the electoral law, that the transmission of results, electronic transmission of results in real time was a factor in the guideline. Okay. So the discretion in question, even to tell you that the judges were they were acting more like opposition, they are acting more like defendants in this case than the umpire. For example, you are telling the world that this discretion was what was used. Why INEC has made several press releases where it apologized to Nigerians for their inability to transmit results through the electronic means. And what were the reasons adduced? They said it was a technical glitch. And this technical glitch Nigerians have queried. How could this have occurred where there were two elections or three elections going on simultaneously, and the technical glitch did not occur in the case of the House
great, I need to interrupt you before you go further. So here is a precise judgment it gave to dismiss that particular petition tendered by the APC, by the Labour Party and PDP. It said, on the issue of non-compliance with the Electoral Act in the conduct of the presidential election, the court held that the Independent National Electoral Commission is at liberty to decide on the manner in which election results can be transmitted. That also the presiding justice further held that the electoral body cannot be compelled to transmit election results electronically, as held in a judgment by a federal high court sitting in Abuja, which has not been appealed against. So apparently this was already taken to the federal high court in Abuja and it wasn't appealed against. So since that wasn't appealed against, that particular case stands strong, and the tribunal, the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal decides that if that case has not been appealed against and no contrary judgment has been given of that, it still stands that whichever method INEC decides to collate or transmit results remains valid.
In fact, let me tell you, these people have ended up confusing a lot of people, and unfortunately, a lot of people are ignorant about these issues and the law. This is what I have to say. Even if there were rulings and the INEC has discretion, what manner of discretion are we talking about? The discretion is based on the electoral law, which it permits and empowers INEC to determine the guidelines for the conduct of the election. That is, as far as that discretion is recognized in law. It's not that in the middle of the game you will change the rules. The discretion does not mean the power to change the rules without informing the participants in the election. Nowhere in the world is that one done. This attempt to confuse the matter, and even to lie on behalf of INEC, which INEC in themselves, in their official statement, said what was was the glitch. Now, a tribunal is coming to hold for INEC that it was at discretion to change the rule of the game. Discretion here does not mean the power to change the rules of the game. It means that the electoral act empowers INEC to determine the guidelines, and the INEC have determined the guidelines, and the guidelines were being followed. And then, when in between these guidelines being followed, you decide what else to do without even bringing any official rules to the table. So, what time did the INEC choose the discretion? What official communication was the discretion communicated through? Look, in this country, we play a lot and we take a lot of people for granted. We do. That's why somebody can barefacely sit in a tribunal, tell Nigeria this thing, despite the fact there is an electoral act, yes, which gives INEC the right to present guidelines, and the guidelines were not followed. Which other discretion are they talking about? Discretion to change the rule of the game in the middle of the game is discretion. That is criminality. That is fraudulent. It's like somebody coming to tell you, I want to sell you a vehicle, and this is a Mercedes-Benz, and you come to show you Mercedes-Benz, and you go home to sign a document and make your payment. You come to pick your vehicle, and it's giving you a product, and it's telling you that it's discretion. That is fraudulent. That is fraudulent. We should stop supporting evil. And these are the things that these people are doing that is undermining this country. They are undermining society. How can you be struggling to help people undermine the constitution of Nigeria?
But great. These 5 judges were highly recommended, highly respected lordships while they gave this tribunal statement on Wednesday. Would we say that the tribunal judges deliberately twisted the constitution to suit a narrative? I don't think we want to sell that narrative. I don't think Nigerians want to believe in that. Some persons logically believe that the political parties tendering their petition did not really lock the petition tight. They created room for porosities that were taken advantage of, which was what the court used in terms of dismissing some of these cases. For example, let me draw your attention back. We're trying to look at both sides of the coin, so we know where we are coming from, in as much as a lot of Nigerians are emotional as to how things panned out. So one of the things that the court said about the Labour Party is saying that their votes they were disenfranchised. Some votes were taken from them to add to either the APC or the PDP. And the court asked, what evidence do you have? They said that the window whereby when they were asking INEC for result sheets from the IRA portal, INEC wasted time. They couldn't get a lot of it. But then the court asked, what about your party agents at each of these polling units? Why couldn't they provide the election results that you required to prove to the court that indeed in all of these polling units that you said that votes were deliberately not uploaded or possibly deleted or whatever? You couldn't provide any proof. And all of the cases you tendered, out of the witnesses you brought in, this is what they even said. They said the court, actually, I want to read out what the court said. The court said out of the 13 witnesses called by the petitioners, only 3 had their statement on oath filed along with the joint petition of the Labour Party and its presidential candidate as required by the Electoral Act. He said the petitioners did not plead any evidence to substantiate the allegation of non-compliance electoral law during the February 25 presidential election, and added that they failed to prove beyond reasonable doubt the allegation of corrupt practices alleged in their petition. So the question is, would you say the Honorable Court, in its sacredness, did not do due diligence, or they untwisted the constitution to suit a narrative? What exactly transpired for them to come to that conclusion?
Let me start by saying, you said respected judges. I think I'm knowing these characters for the first time. I don't know if you have had a dealing with them to know how respected they are. Maybe those who know them before could say they are respected. They're
highly respected, highly recommended, actually.
Okay, recommended by who? I don't know. Maybe those who they have helped out, maybe. This is where I'm going to. Okay. I'm going to judge everything simply on the matters of law, based on what is known, not all of these innuendos that have been banded around the world to help them achieve their ends. Let's even start by the one you said, talked about drug, the forfeiture. That somebody is able to go into America and come out, does that mean the person has not had any criminal record. You can imagine a judge telling you that because one individual can travel into a country and come out, that means he has not committed a crime. In America, for such a crime, which has already been registered in the court of Illinois, that person is considered a felon. He loses even his right to vote or to be voted for. And secondly, we forgot that in 2014, that in a case between Muhammad Abacha, the second son of the former late head of state, and versus the Federal Republic of Nigeria, that these judges ruled that every form of forfeiture is akin to a crime. That for whatever event you have forfeited anything, you have committed a crime. And the electoral law says once you have done that, you are not qualified to. Is it not pure and simple? And has it not also been adjudicated before in court? Now, to tell me that these judges are respected highly, in this same electoral cycle, the 2023 Electoral Act says that no one individual can participate in two different elections in this one election cycle. We saw Lawan, former Senate President, we saw Dave Umahi, we saw the former governor of Cross River, all of them picked from and contested for the presidency under APC. They ran for the primary, and when they all failed, somehow their names appeared as candidates for senatorial elections, and they were taken to court. And it is in this same country that judges said it didn't matter. Yet it's on the electoral, it's pronounced openly, literally in the electoral law, that you cannot do that. So, my dear, let me say this. People must find excuses. Even when you catch an armed robber, some of them will tell you that I've not stolen before. Some of them will say because my mother is sick and everything. We keep finding excuses for undermining our court and our laws and rule of law in this country.
Okay.
Let me tell you, you are coming to court where even INEC, where some records you are presented to INEC, 18,000 polling units, and the records that you presented, which through the electoral, INEC is mandated to maintain the record of his own results in the electronic server. And the document INEC have hosted on the electronic server were blocked, and before the Honorable Court, they themselves could not even say they know what that result represents. You are talking about forfeiture. Even the Senate, the leader who was who was the witness for the president.
That's Bamidele.
Yes, admitted to the forfeiture. And the question is, what has been adjudicated upon in Nigeria? What does forfeiture represent? And the case in America, does he represent a criminal offense or not? He said no. You said it was not him. It was his account. Does account exist in limbo? Does he exist, without attachment to a name? Some of these are jargons and innuendos against the rule of law, the literal interpretation of law. Under the canons of interpretation, both the literal rule and the golden rule, all of these things being used are just we are joking. Let me put it down. We're joking.
Great, Imo. I would have loved to actually get more from you. Let's ask you more questions because we still have a couple of issues where I'd love to get your perspective. But I sincerely appreciate your input on the World News at 6. We've actually run out of time. Thank you so much for giving us your time.
By the rule of law, it doesn't matter who it is because the future, it can always turn around and be against us. The rule of law must prevail.
All right.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Great. I sincerely appreciate. Thank you. All right. Meanwhile, 9 ward chairmen and about 700 members of the New Nigeria People's Party in Kaduna have decamped to the Labour Party. The member representing Chikun Kajuru Federal Constituency in the state, Ekane Abubakar Adams, and the Northwest chairman of the Labour Party, Umaru Muhammadu, on Thursday received the decampees in Kaduna. The decampees are from Kujama, Narayi, Sabun Tasha, Kakao, Sabun Gari Rido, Nasarawa, Gwagwada, and Yewa wards. Ekane, with other Labour Party chieftains, while receiving them at his constituency office, disclosed that they had taken the right decision given the rising profile of the party in the state. He said further that more stakeholders from different political parties will have no choice but to come into the party considering the good representation so far seen. He stated further that history is about to be made in Kaduna and the nation because the Labour Party, stating further, is a movement which is set to present a benchmark for good governance. Meanwhile, the Deputy National Publicity Secretary of the People's Democratic Party, Ibrahim Abdullahi, has said that the party is yet to recover from the shock of the ruling of the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal. Abdullahi wondered why the judges ruled that there was nothing wrong with the last presidential election. On Wednesday, you do recall the tribunal dismissed all petitions from the PDP presidential candidate, Atiku Abubakar, and his counterpart from the Labour Party, Peter Obi, against President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. The court had affirmed Tinubu's victory in the February 14 presidential election. However, reacting to the outcome, Abdullahi said it would have made much sense if the tribunal had ordered a rerun. He featured on a particular popular television station, Arise News, on Friday. Abdullahi said there was enough evidence provided by the PDP to nullify the elections. Now, in order for us to wrap up the world news at 6, here again are the top stories. You heard that Atiku has raised an alarm as Presidential Election Petition Tribunal refuses to release judgment and reveals letter. 9 ward chairman, 700 NNPP members decamp to Labour Party in Kaduna. PDP Chieftain declares Presidential Tribunal Court should have ordered a rerun. Labour Party floors APC PDP at Tribunal National Poll. That's a wrap on the world news at 6 right here on Voice of the People 90.3 FM. My name is Esther Wachuku. Good evening.